Let's talk about what's underneath the surface of being too friendly. We often see friendliness as a virtue, and to be clear, kindness, warmth, and generosity are beautiful human traits. But when friendliness becomes a mask we wear to feel safe, to avoid conflict, or to be accepted at all costs, it stops being an act of connection and starts becoming a survival strategy. It becomes armor. Many of us have been conditioned, especially from a young age, to believe that our worth is tied to how likable or agreeable we are. We were praised for being polite, easygoing, and pleasant. We were taught to smooth things over, to keep the peace, to not rock the boat. And if we grew up in homes or environments where love or stability was inconsistent or conditional, we might have learned to read people's moods before they entered a room, adjust our tone to avoid confrontation, or smile when we were deeply uncomfortable. These behaviors aren't random. They're responses to real emotional threats. That's what makes people-pleasing not just a habit but a deeply ingrained coping mechanism. Being overly friendly is often the adult version of a child who had to manage the emotional atmosphere of their surroundings to feel safe. It's a learned response. The friendliness becomes a way to gain control in uncertain situations. If I'm likable enough, they won't leave. If I'm nice enough, I won't get yelled at. If I'm agreeable enough, I won't be hurt or abandoned. It's emotional labor that often goes unseen and unacknowledged. What's tricky is that the world often rewards this behavior, at least on the surface. People who are overly friendly are perceived as easy to work with, pleasant to be around, the ones who always say yes, always help out, always put others first. But beneath that, there is often resentment, burnout, and a sense of invisibility. Over time, when we give too much of ourselves away, we lose the ability to connect with who we really are. We start silencing our own needs and desires. We downplay our pain, dismiss our discomfort, and convince ourselves that we're fine because keeping others happy feels safer than telling the truth. There's also a vulnerability that comes with acknowledging that our niceness might be coming from fear, not from genuine love or connection. That's not an easy truth to face. It requires us to examine the patterns we've built our lives around. But that awareness is powerful. When we begin to see our over-friendliness not as a flaw, but as a clue, something that points to unhealed wounds we can start to heal. We can get curious about where those patterns started. What was I afraid would happen if I said no? Where did I learn that I needed to be pleasant to be safe? What's the cost of always putting others first? This kind of emotional honesty takes courage. And it's not about swinging to the other extreme, becoming cold or detached or indifferent. It's about learning to live in the tension between kindness and self-respect. We can be friendly and still have firm boundaries. We can be compassionate without being compliant. We can show up fully and authentically without performing for approval. One of the most misunderstood things about people-pleasing is that it isn't about kindness, it's about control. It's about trying to manage how others see us, how they feel about us, and how they respond to us. It comes from a place of fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. And that fear is deeply human. But the problem is that in trying to control other people's perceptions, we give up our authenticity. We end up molding ourselves into whatever we think others want us to be, and in doing so, we abandon the parts of ourselves that are messy, complicated, or real. The irony is that what we're really seeking through excessive friendliness, connection, love, acceptance, can only truly happen when we are being honest and whole. When we let go of the need to be perfect or pleasant all the time, we create space for real relationships, where people know us and love us as we are, not as we pretend to be. That's where intimacy grows. That's where trust is built. But to get there, we have to practice discomfort. We have to be willing to sit in the unease of not being liked all the time. We have to learn that no is a complete sentence. That disagreement isn't rejection. That conflict, when handled with care, can actually bring people closer, not push them away. We have to unlearn the belief that our value is dependent on how easy we are to deal with. This is a journey of returning to ourselves. It's about asking not just how we can be kind to others, but how we can be kind to ourselves. It's about recognizing that our needs matter, our feelings are valid, and our voice deserves to be heard, not only when it's soft or agreeable, but when it's firm, when it challenges the norm, and when it stands alone. That's not selfish. That's self-honoring. And when we start to relate to our friendliness with more awareness, we give ourselves more choice. We can choose to be kind because we want to, not because we're afraid. We can choose to offer warmth without losing our integrity. We can choose connection over performance. That's the heart of living authentically. That's the power of understanding the difference between true kindness and protective people-pleasing. We live in a world that often tells us, in both subtle and loud ways, that being likable is the key to success, happiness, and connection. From an early age, many of us were praised when we were agreeable, compliant, polite, and pleasant. We were taught, sometimes explicitly and sometimes through silent messages, that our value increased when others found us easy to be around. But there's a quiet cost to constantly chasing likability. It can lead us away from who we really are. And that cost becomes clearer the more we prioritize being liked over being real. Authenticity, by contrast, asks something much deeper from us. It's not about image, it's about alignment. It's about choosing to live, speak, and act in a way that reflects our inner truth, even when it's not the most palatable or popular option. While likability seeks approval, authenticity seeks integrity. And that difference is everything. The truth is, being authentic doesn't guarantee that everyone will like you. In fact, it almost guarantees the opposite, because when you start showing up as your full self, you inevitably challenge people's expectations of you. You stop fitting into the molds they've designed. You may stop saying yes when you mean no. You may stop softening your tone to protect their comfort. And for people who were benefiting from your silence or your compliance, your authenticity might feel threatening. But that tension is a sign of growth, not failure. We often mistake likability for connection, but they are not the same. Being liked can be a surface-level response. People can like your persona without knowing a single meaningful thing about you. But authenticity fosters something much more valuable: trust. When we are honest about who we are, even when it's messy or complicated, we invite others to do the same. We create a space where real conversations can happen. And in those conversations, intimacy begins. Respect deepens. We feel seen, not just admired. It takes courage to be authentic because it means risking disconnection. It means stepping out from behind the version of ourselves we've curated and saying, "This is me. This is what I value. This is what I believe. This is where I stand." And there's no guarantee that others will respond the way we hope. But the more we practice authenticity, the more we realize that the people who truly matter, who are capable of real connection, won't walk away from us because we're real. They'll lean in. They'll appreciate our honesty. And if they don't, we learn something important about who is meant to walk with us. The pursuit of likability often comes from fear: the fear of rejection, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being alone. So we try to manage how others see us. We edit ourselves. We smile when we're sad. We stay silent when we're angry. We agree when we disagree. We try to be who we think others want us to be. But every time we trade our truth for someone else's comfort, we abandon a piece of ourselves. And over time, that adds up. We start feeling disconnected from our own lives. We might appear successful or beloved, but inside we feel empty or unseen. Because the real us hasn't shown up. Authenticity asks us to come back home to ourselves. To reconnect with our values. To listen to the inner voice that tells us what is true for us, even when it's hard to hear. It asks us to be in relationship with ourselves before we try to manage relationships with others. It invites us to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And it's important to clarify that being authentic doesn't mean being brutally honest or careless with our words. It doesn't mean being self-centered or indifferent to how others feel. It means being grounded. It means telling the truth with compassion. It means showing up with both courage and kindness. It means saying, "This is what I believe, and I still want to stay in connection with you if we disagree." It's not about pushing people away, it's about making space for relationships that are based on honesty, not performance. One of the most powerful things about choosing authenticity is that it gives us freedom. When we stop trying to be everything to everyone, we reclaim our energy. We stop living for applause and start living with intention. We stop fearing criticism and start respecting our boundaries. And slowly, we begin to trust ourselves again. We begin to realize that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy. That our imperfections, our struggles, and our vulnerabilities aren't barriers to connection, they're the bridge. Authenticity doesn't promise ease, but it promises depth. It invites meaningful relationships over shallow ones. It invites a life that feels aligned rather than approved of. And when we practice it, we find that the right people, the ones who resonate with our truth, will find their way to us. We no longer have to hustle for love or acceptance. We simply show up as we are, and let what's real unfold. In a world that often tells us to fit in, authenticity asks us to belong to ourselves first. That belonging, deep, rooted, and unwavering, is the foundation of a life that feels whole. We don't need to be liked by everyone. We need to be known by the right people. And we need to know ourselves. That's the power of authenticity. It may not make us the most popular, but it makes us the most free. Boundaries are not walls. They're not punishments. They're not about pushing people away or closing ourselves off from connection. Boundaries are, at their core, an act of clarity. They're the lines we draw to protect our time, our energy, our mental and emotional health. And perhaps most importantly, they're the way we teach others how to treat us. When we lack boundaries, we leave our sense of worth open to negotiation. We silently communicate to the world that our needs are less important than others. But when we have clear, compassionate boundaries, we send a different message, one that says, I value myself, and I expect you to do the same. Many of us struggle with boundaries because we were never taught what they really are or why they matter. In fact, some of us were taught that setting boundaries is selfish, rude, or even unloving. We were told that saying no means we're difficult. That speaking up makes us too much. That prioritizing ourselves is something to feel guilty about. So we learn to override our instincts, to tolerate discomfort, and to make others' needs more important than our own. Over time, that pattern erodes our self-trust. We begin to second-guess our feelings. We ignore the signals our body sends when something feels off. We abandon ourselves in the name of keeping the peace. But peace that comes at the cost of your well-being is not peace, it's a performance. It's unsustainable. And it leads to burnout, resentment, and disconnection. The truth is, without boundaries, we cannot have healthy relationships. Because healthy relationships require mutual respect. They require an understanding of where I end and you begin. They require space for both people to be seen, heard, and honored. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you don't care about the other person. It means you also care about yourself. It means you are willing to engage with others in a way that's honest and sustainable, not one-sided or self-sacrificing. And the most powerful part of boundaries is this: they don't just protect you, they teach. They show others what is okay and what is not okay. They clarify expectations. They prevent misunderstandings. They create a container where trust can grow. When you say, I'm not available after 7 p.m., you teach people to respect your time. When you say, I'm not comfortable discussing that, you teach people to respect your emotional limits. When you say, I need a moment to think before responding, you model emotional regulation and self-respect. And when you follow through on your boundaries, not with anger, but with consistency, you send a clear, powerful message: I know my worth. Boundaries are not about control, they are about ownership. You don't get to decide how others behave. But you do get to decide what you allow, what you engage with, and what you walk away from. That's where your power lives. That's where your agency lives. And yes, it takes courage. Especially if you've spent most of your life trying to be the easy one, the nice one, the one who never complains. But courage is a muscle, and boundaries are one of the ways we strengthen it. When we begin to set boundaries, it's normal to feel guilty. It's normal to feel selfish or afraid that others will be disappointed. But guilt is not a reliable compass in these moments. It's a sign that you're breaking old patterns, not doing something wrong. And the people who genuinely care about you will adjust. They may be surprised at first. They may push back. But the right people will adapt. They will respect the space you need to take care of yourself. The people who don't, who react with anger, manipulation, or distance, are showing you something important: they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries more than they were respecting you. It's also important to remember that boundaries are not static. They evolve. What worked for you in one season of life may need to shift in another. Boundaries require self-awareness. They ask you to regularly check in with yourself and ask, what do I need right now? What's okay with me and what's not okay? And the more you practice this kind of self-inquiry, the more you'll find clarity. You'll start to notice the early signs of discomfort, instead of waiting until you're overwhelmed or exhausted. You'll catch the small moments of unease and respond with intention, instead of reacting out of frustration. We also have to extend this respect to others. Just as we want our boundaries honored, we must be willing to honor theirs. Boundaries go both ways. They are part of the social contract of respect and mutual care. They create safety not just for ourselves, but for everyone in the relationship. In a culture that often rewards overwork, overgiving, and overextending, boundaries are a radical act of self-love. They're not a rejection of others, they are a commitment to showing up more fully, more honestly, and more sustainably. You can still be kind, generous, and loving and have limits. In fact, you'll have more capacity to give from a place of fullness, not depletion. When you model healthy boundaries, you give others permission to do the same. You show them that it's okay to protect your peace. That it's okay to choose rest over obligation. That it's okay to say no without an explanation. And most of all, you show them what it looks like to live in alignment with your values. So remember this, you are not responsible for how others respond to your boundaries. You are only responsible for being clear, compassionate, and consistent. And when you hold that line not with harshness, but with love, you send a powerful message to the world: I know who I am, I know what I need, and I will no longer betray myself to make others comfortable. That's not just self-care. That's self-respect. That's how we teach the world how to treat us. Courage is often misunderstood. We imagine it as something loud, bold, maybe even aggressive. We associate it with grand gestures or fearless action. But real courage, the kind that transforms relationships and fosters trust, is often quiet. It's not about dominating the conversation or being the smartest person in the room. It's about telling the truth. It's about saying what needs to be said, with clarity and compassion, even when it feels uncomfortable. Because here's the truth: honesty without empathy isn't integrity, it's cruelty. And silence, when your truth is aching to be spoken, is not peace, it's self-abandonment. Courage lives in the space between. Many of us learned that we have two choices: be nice and keep the peace, or be honest and risk hurting someone. But those aren't the only options. We can be direct without being destructive. We can be truthful without being harsh. It's not either/or. The most courageous communicators are the ones who tell the truth with love. They say what they mean, and they say it in a way that builds bridges instead of burning them. That's not weakness, it's strength that's been refined by self-awareness. Saying what you mean begins with knowing what you mean. That requires emotional clarity. It requires a willingness to slow down, to listen to yourself, to ask, what's really going on here? Am I hurt? Am I afraid? Am I angry because a boundary was crossed, or because I didn't speak up earlier? It's easy to lash out. It's harder to pause and tell the truth behind the emotion. But that's what integrity asks of us, not just to speak up, but to speak from a grounded place. We often fear that if we express ourselves clearly, we'll be perceived as difficult, too much, or confrontational. So we water ourselves down. We smile when we're frustrated. We say it's fine when it's not. We stay quiet when something important needs to be addressed. We convince ourselves that keeping the peace is more important than speaking our truth. But peace built on silence is fragile. It doesn't last. And over time, it breeds resentment. Because unspoken truth doesn't disappear, it festers. It comes out sideways. It shows up as sarcasm, passive aggression, withdrawal, or bitterness. And that's not kindness. That's fear wearing a mask. Courageous communication means telling the truth in real time, not months later when we've already checked out of the relationship. It means saying, that comment didn't sit right with me, or I felt dismissed in that conversation, or I need more time to think about this. These are simple statements, but they require emotional presence. They require self-trust. And they create space for resolution, growth, and real understanding. The opposite of this kind of courage is reactivity, saying things impulsively, without considering the impact. Some people confuse brutal honesty with strength. But being harsh isn't brave, it's often a defense mechanism. It's easier to be mean than to be vulnerable. It's easier to raise your voice than to say, I felt hurt. But vulnerability is where connection happens. It's where trust is built. And that's what courageous communication is about: truth that connects, not truth that wounds. You can disagree with someone and still be respectful. You can give feedback without attacking their character. You can assert your needs without shaming the other person. This isn't about sugarcoating or avoiding hard conversations. It's about delivering the message with dignity. It's about remembering that the goal is clarity, not victory. Communication is not a battleground. It's a bridge. And the stronger we build that bridge, the more honest and resilient our relationships become. One of the most powerful phrases in communication is, "I need to tell you something that's hard for me to say, but it's important." That one sentence softens the ground. It lets the other person know that your intention is care, not conflict. It sets the tone for a conversation rooted in respect. It signals that you're not coming in to attack, but to connect. Saying what you mean also means knowing your boundaries. It means not over-explaining, not shrinking to avoid discomfort, and not apologizing for your truth. It means standing in your values and trusting that clarity is a kindness, even when it's not easy to hear. Because when we speak clearly, others don't have to guess where we stand. They don't have to walk on eggshells or read between the lines. Clarity reduces anxiety. It makes room for others to show up with honesty, too. And when someone else is courageous enough to speak their truth, we honor that by listening with curiosity, not defensiveness. We don't interrupt or rush to correct them. We say, "Thank you for telling me." We reflect on what they're saying, not just how it makes us feel. That kind of listening takes just as much courage as speaking. But it transforms relationships. It invites mutual respect. The more we practice this kind of courageous honesty, the more we trust ourselves. We stop rehearsing conversations in our heads or regretting the things we didn't say. We start living with more integrity, more peace, more connection. We learn that we don't have to choose between being kind and being clear. We can be both. We don't have to fear discomfort. We can move through it with grace. And we don't have to shout to be heard. We can speak from a place of grounded strength. At the end of the day, courage in communication isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about choosing honesty over ease, connection over control, and truth over performance. It's about remembering that our words carry weight and that when we speak them with intention, they can heal, reveal, and transform not only our relationships, but our own sense of self.